Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for being here today. Today's video is going to be my March wrap-up, which I'm really excited about because I read some really good books this month. And yeah, I'm just really excited. So first, let's do a joke. What would you call two banana skins? A pair of slippers. All right, so hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thanks again so much for being here today. Today's video is going to be my March wrap-up. I read 8 books this month, so I'm gonna break it out into romances that I read, fiction that I read, and then school books that I read. And I also just wanted to talk about my rating system, because I usually get questions about this. A 1 out of 5 means I really didn't like it. It just was just either really bad writing or the story was really boring or something. I don't usually give out 1 out of 5s very often, but it just means I genuinely didn't like it. 2 out of 5 means I didn't like it, but there was something that I did like about it. So maybe I just didn't like the overall story, but one of the characters was really fun to read or one of the plots was really interesting to follow, but I didn't like it very much at all. 3 out of 5 means I probably did like it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It kind of sits right in the middle for me. I enjoyed it, but it's not gonna go down in history as a new favorite of mine. It's just something that I read that I enjoyed, and that's it. And then 4 out of 5 and 5 out of 5 is interesting because 5 out of 5 means that the writing was exceptionally beautiful or it's a brand new favorite of mine, whereas 4 out of 5 means I really, really liked it, but it's not an absolute favorite of mine. And it's just those two are kind of gut feelings for me. I know what some of my favorite books are, and so when I give something a 5 out of 5, that means I'm saying this is a new favorite or this writing is exceptional, whereas a 4 out of 5 means really, really enjoyed that, thought it was really good, but not an all-time favorite. So that's kind of my rating system. But anyway, let's get into it. We're gonna start with the romances with Act Your Age, Eve Brown. This was the first romance that I read in March, and I gave this a 5 out of 5. It checked all the boxes for me in terms of romance. It was super sweet, super romantic. The writing was really funny and also kind of dazzling. There's a certain plot line or there's a certain scene in this book that takes place near a pond in the moonlight, and it was just so beautifully written, and I felt like I was watching a princess movie. I thought it was so sweet. And it's also super steamy. So it kind of checked all the boxes for me in terms of romance. In terms of story, this is the third book in the Brown Sisters series by Talia Hibbert. So first is Chloe Brown, then is Dani Brown, then you get Eve Brown. I've gotten a lot of questions about can I read the third one first? And technically you can. You will miss a few things, but overall you'll understand the story. It's just that I would recommend you read all 3 because all 3 are hilarious and wonderful. So even if you want to read the third one first, I still think that you should read the other 2 because they're all wonderful. So basically the story follows Eve Brown, the youngest sister, and she has to find a job. And so she goes out on this drive and she sees this bed and breakfast that's open and she sees that they're hiring. So she goes in for an interview, even though she's not prepared. She didn't bring a resume or a cover letter. She wasn't even really planning on interviewing that day. She just is taking it as sees the moment, let me just apply and interview. And the man that runs the bed and breakfast named Jacob does not like this. He's all about organization. He wanted her to be more on top of things. And so when she comes in without any preparation, he's like, yeah, I don't like this girl. And so from there, it's not really an enemies to lovers romance. It's more of an annoyance to romance, I guess, because Eve Brown at least in my interpretation, Eve Brown doesn't look at Jacob as an enemy. She's just oh, he's frustrated with me and I'm still gonna do me. I'm happy and I'm gonna have fun. So that's just what it's gonna be. So overall, I thought that this book was so funny. It was so steamy. Oh my God. And it was just lovely. I really, really loved this one. It's my favorite of the 3 and I highly recommend you pick it up, and you also pick up the other 2 because they're all dazzling and wonderful. Okay, so Parker's snoring super loud, so he's moving around back there. Sorry if that's distracting, but The next book I read was The X-Talk. So for the first 3/4 of this book, it was like a solid 4 out of 5 for me. I thought it was going to be this like really cool romance that I really ended up loving. And then the final fourth happens and I felt very unsatisfied. So the basic plot of the X Talk is that there's these two coworkers that don't like each other. Gives me the hating game vibe there. He's new to the job. She's been there for like 10 years and their radio station is dying. And so she comes up with this idea to do like a relationship-based radio show. And then they both get roped into doing a whole radio show where they act like they're exes, but they're not actually exes. And so there's like a whole discussion on like journalistic integrity and like lying on the air and making up this fake relationship. But while they're making up this fake relationship, they actually do get to know each other and they have to spend a lot of time together. And then, you know, there's a connection between the two of them. So I really liked that aspect of it. I loved the narrator for this audiobook because I thought she had a really good like podcasty radio voice. And so I was really, really loving it. But basically the whole book, you kind of have this kind of villainous character, and they're not a main character, but they are a villain in the book. And then I feel like there's no proper justice at the end of it. I just feel like you kind of spend the whole book knowing who the bad person is. And then at the end, you're waiting for like this big redemptive moment where it's kind of like, you know, like fuck off kind of thing, like this really cool moment. And instead it gets kind of just swept away. Like it gets addressed, but it doesn't get quite the punch that I wanted in it. So that's why I gave it a 3 out of 5 instead of 4 out of 5. I think it's still a really fun romance. And if you can get it as an audiobook, I think it would be fun to just kind of like have in your ears while you're like, you know, doing stuff around the house. But not an all-time favorite, but still thought it was fun. Not super steamy either. There are steamy moments, but I don't know, not super believable steamy moments, if that makes sense. I hope any of this is making sense. It's a 3 out of 5 for me. And then the final romance I read this month was a pho love story. I talked about this in my 21 books I want to read in 2021. I was so excited for this book to come out and I gave it a 4 out of 5. I thought it was so good. And I talked about, so it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet situation because both of the main characters, Bao and Lin, their parents own competing pho restaurants. And so they like know of each other and they've spoken in the past, but they know that they're not supposed to be close. They know they're not supposed to be friends and they know they're definitely not supposed to date. And so I love that plot, like just kind of this like Romeo and Juliet kind of moment, but then also I love books that take place in restaurants, and the descriptions around food in this book are so good. It's like, I was so hungry while I was reading this. It was phenomenal. I loved the descriptions. But what I loved about this book is that you're kind of expecting this kind of like, oh, they just shouldn't date because their families own competing restaurants. But there's actually like real tragic reasons why the families don't like each other. And I don't want to spoil anything, but it was deeper than I thought it was going to be. Like as like just looking at the cover and kind of knowing the backstory, I was like, oh, it's just competing restaurants. But really there's like some really wonderful nuanced conversation. I will say that this is a young adult romance, so there's no steaminess in it, but those sweet high school moments are like super genuine. I could like picture a romance in high school, you know what I mean? Like I remembered the kind of like high school butterflies that I'd gotten in the past. So really, really loved that. And I just thought it was a really, really great story. And yeah, so there you go. All right, so those were the 3 romances I read this month. And now we're gonna get into the fiction and the school books. But before we do that, I wanna thank the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace.
All right, as you all know, I've been working with Squarespace for the last couple of months, and I absolutely love not only how easy it is to use their website, but also how many templates they have. I love looking at templates. So I came down here, I clicked blog, and now I have all of these templates. And what I love is that you just click one that resonates with you, and then you can change the font, you can change the size of the font, you can change the page layouts, you can change the colors. There's so much you can do with these templates. It's so easy to follow. So if you're interested in Squarespace, you can go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Noelle Gallagher to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
All right, so next book is Kristen Hanna's The Four Winds. I read this in the same reading vlog as Act Your Age, Eve Brown, and I cried. Cried so hard at the end of this book. I could kind of see the end coming, so I kind of was braced for it, but even then, still sobbed, still was like completely moved. Something I'll say about Kristen Hanna's writing is that it is so beautifully tragic. Like, her books are often very, very sad at the end, but she does a beautiful job at getting you there, and so I really like her writing. So I talked about this a lot in that reading vlog with the Act Your Age, Eve Brown, but originally I gave this a 5 out of 5, and actually I think it's more of a 4 out of 5 for me, because based off my rating system, it is not an all-time new favorite, and it's almost a little formulaic to her other books. So still super sad and still super beautiful, but I was able to kind of guess the ending because I've read 2 of her other books and they follow a similar pattern. But anyway, the storyline for this is that you're really following a mother, Esme, and a daughter, Loretta, and you're watching their 2 perspectives in a life of huge change and sadness and fear and just like wondering if life is ever going to go back to normal. So basically this family lives on this like beautiful farmland, and they are doing such great things with their crops, and they're able to sell them, and they're able to just have this like really wonderful life. And then at the time of the Dust Bowl, the land, not only is there like this huge drought, but the land turns against them, so they're not able to produce the beautiful crops that they once had. And because of that, they lose everything. They can't buy food. Since there's a Dust Bowl going on, there's huge dust storms going through the town, and everyone is leaving their town. So like what was once home to them is now becoming less and less of a home to them, because it's like the land doesn't even want them there anymore. And so, yeah, I don't want to say too much else because I don't want to spoil what happens, but you are really following the minds of the mother, Esme, and the daughter, Loretta, and how they overcome the challenges from the Dust Bowl. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that, but really beautifully written, and I did sob. So there you go. Next up, oh my God, this book. This book was so phenomenal, and that is James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. I thought it was exceptional. I thought the writing was breathtaking. I gave it a 5 out of 5. The first read, so I've only read this once, obviously, but on this first read, I was really just trying to take in the story. I was just following the story, but I already know that the second time I read this, I am going to annotate this book to filth, because it's like every line is filled with so much meaning and so much beauty. It's just like, it is such a beautiful piece of writing. I loved it so much. So, whoa, if Van Gogh was our 20th century artist saint, James Baldwin is our 20th century one. That is such a good quote. Okay. Oh my God, that's super cute. Basically, this takes place in 1950s Paris, and it's following this man named David, who's from the United States, and he moves to Paris, I think, to just kind of like find himself. Like, he's just not happy in America anymore, so he just goes to Paris, and there he meets a man named Giovanni, and I don't want to spoil anything, because I really didn't know a whole lot about this book going into it, and I think that really added to my reading experience, because everything was a surprise to me, and I really loved my reading experience, so I'll just say that. 1950s Paris. A man moves to Paris, and he finds another man named Giovanni, and there's an instant magnetic connection between the two of them, even though David wants to act like it's not there. So, that's what I'll say about Giovanni's Room. It is tragic, it is stunning, it is really, really sad at places, but it is beautifully, beautifully written, in my opinion. All right, the sun is on the move, but we're now going to move on to the school reading I've done this month, and the first one is The Social Life of Books. This was for a book review assignment. I literally just had to pick a book off of a list and then read it and write my first ever graduate level book review. And I chose this book. And it's all about reading and books in the 18th century. That's it. Like, it's a historical discussion on what people were reading and why people were reading. I don't know. I thought the writing was really good, but unless you're really interested in like the history of reading or the history of physical books, then I don't think it's a book that everyone needs to read. And there you go. The next book I read for school was Roxana by Daniel Defoe. This book could have easily been a 4 out of 5 for me because it started off super, super interesting. And then the final like third of it happened and it started to get very repetitive and very boring. There is a hand on the front, so we know I love that. But the story itself is cool. There's this girl named Roxana and she has 5 kids and then her husband abandons them because he is not making any money. And he's like, I can't deal with this anymore. And he leaves her. And that in itself is interesting because then she has to figure out what to do. And she abandons her 5 kids and becomes a mistress. So she starts relationships with wealthy men that pay her to be their mistress, which is super interesting. And for the first 3 guys that she is a mistress of, I was really invested. And then she just keeps going, and it's like this very circular story for a while where it's like, okay, did this with 1 guy, did this with 2 guys, did this with 3 guys, did this with 4 guys, and it was just so repetitive to the point where I was like, wow, you could have cut out like 200 pages and I would have really loved this book. The ending is also super weird, so to me it sits at a strong 2 out of 5. Could have been a 4, ended up as a 2. Not my favorite book I've ever read for school. All right, and the final book of this wrap up is a book that I have not finished at the time that I'm recording this video, but I will have finished it by the end of March. So I wanted to make sure that I was bringing it up now just because I know, like, I'm super close to finishing it. So that is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. If you have watched previous videos of mine, you know how much I don't like Bleak House by Charles Dickens. That was my first book by him, and it was just like too like judicial. It all takes place like in the court system, and it was like super long, and I did not click with it at all. It was just not my thing. However, I have absolutely been loving Great Expectations. I don't know how it's gonna end. I'm very close to finishing it, but I have a feeling that Dickens is gonna catch me off guard. But if it ends well, I could see myself rating this a 4 or 5 out of 5. So either a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5 just because of how much I enjoyed this book. There is so much hand imagery in this book. I felt like anytime hands were coming up, I was circling and highlighting and making note of it. So if I could, I would write a whole paper on hands in this book because of how incredible the hand descriptions are. But basically you're following this guy named Pip. You're like getting the story of Pip from an older Pip. So it's like older Pip is reflecting on his life, and that's what this story is. And so Pip is being raised to be a blacksmith. And then one day someone arrives and says, hey, you have a benefactor now. And so now I'm going to take you away to London and I'm going to teach you how to be a gentleman, and you're going to get educated and you have a bunch of money now. And so that's basically the plot. And so you see how money starts to work its way into how Pip treats others. Again, not technically done with it, so I can't tell you like my full thoughts on the ending, but it will be done within like the next day or even the next few hours. So I wanted to make sure that I was recording when there was still daylight out, and we are quickly running out of it. So anyway, wanted to mention that in this video. And there are the books that I read in March. Let me know what your favorite or least favorite book in March was and what you're excited to read in April. I do have an April TBR video coming out very soon. I haven't filmed it as of this moment, but I will be filming it very soon. So you'll see that video soon, and I hope you like that one, and I hope you like this one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Okay.